Hello, dear listener. You're here now. That's enough. You've made it through the day, and you're safe, and this quiet space is yours. There's nothing to do here. No need to remember anything. No need to solve, or plan, or wonder. Just listen, if you wish, or let the voice drift past you like wind through tall grass. Tonight, we step gently into a time long ago, when candles burned slower, and footsteps echoed on stone floors for longer, and the world moved at the pace of breath. We go to England, in the final months of Queen Elizabeth I's life, not to speak of power, or reign, or legacy, but simply to sit quietly beside her, in the stillness that came at the end. A time when the grand halls of Whitehall Palace grew quieter, when the weight of the crown felt less like gold and more like memory. She was older now, tired in a way that sleep could not fix. And around her, the rhythms of daily life continued, soft, routine, unnoticed. Can you imagine it? The faint scent of beeswax and old wood. The sound of a distant clock striking, its chime muffled by thick walls. A single candle flickering in a high room, casting shadows that don't move. If you'd like, you can leave a gentle like, just a small gesture, if this moment feels kind to you. Or perhaps subscribe to Wisdom Life, where stories like this unfold each night, slowly, without hurry. And if you feel like it, you might whisper in the comments, where are you listening from tonight, and what time is it there, in your world? Now, if it feels right, let your eyes close. Let your hands rest, open and soft. Let the breath come as it needs to. There's no rush here. No urgency. Just this story, drifting towards you, like ash falling through still air. And so, we begin. Part 1, The Weight of the Crown. The morning light arrives late at Whitehall Palace in those final months of 1603, creeping through thick glass that warps the world beyond the window into soft, wavering shapes. It does not burst in with urgency or brightness, but slips across the floor like a hesitant guest, pausing on the edges of rugs, touching the legs of an old oak table, climbing slowly up the folds of heavy velvet curtains. No one rushes to open them. There is no need. Time here does not measure itself in minutes but in breaths, and the quiet movements of those who move through the halls with downcast eyes and hushed steps. And in her chamber, she stirs only when the warmth of that pale light reaches her hands, resting as they often do upon the arm of a high-backed chair near the hearth. She does not wake suddenly. There is no start, no gasp, no reaching for a clock. She simply becomes aware, first of the fire's low glow, then of the weight of the woolen blanket across her lap, then of the faint ache in her knees, deep and dull like the memory of a long journey. This is how another day begins for Elizabeth. Not with proclamation or counsel, not with fanfare or petition, but with stillness. A handmaid enters, barely making a sound, her feet wrapped in soft cloth to mute her steps on the cold stone. She carries a basin of water warmed over coals, steam curling upward in gentle spirals. She sets it down without speaking. Another follows, bearing fresh linen, folded precisely, smelling faintly of lavender and sunlight from days past. They do not ask if she is ready. They know the rhythm by heart. For decades now, this has been the way. The Queen rises not because she must, but because it is what has always been done. And so, slowly, she shifts in her seat, lifts her arms just enough, and allows them to dress her once more in the garments of a monarch, though today, as every day, she feels less like one. The layers are many. First, a shift of fine linen, cool against her skin. Then stockings of silk, carefully rolled up thin legs that no longer hold their strength. Garters tied gently, not too tight. Then the farthingale, the frame that gives shape, that holds the skirts away from her body as if preserving space around her, even now. The petticoats follow, one by one, each softer than the last, until the great gown is brought forth, dark velvet this morning, embroidered with threads so worn they catch the light only when turned just so. It is lifted over her head with care, settled onto her shoulders with both reverence and routine. The sleeves are fastened, the laces at the back pulled just enough to support, not constrict. And finally, the ruff, starched, wide, a circle of white that frames her face like a halo grown heavy with time. It does not choke her, but it rests there, present, a constant pressure, like duty itself. She does not look in the mirror. She hasn't for years. What would be the use? She knows the lines on her face, the hollows beneath her eyes, the way her lips part slightly now when she breathes. She knows the wigs, the ceruse on her skin, the rouge applied so lightly it might be mistaken for a blush born of warmth alone. But none of it matters here, not truly. In this room, she is not beauty or power. She is presence. A figure who sits, who listens, who signs with a hand that trembles only slightly. The pen is placed in her fingers, the ink already prepared. A document lies before her, land grants, perhaps, or a letter to a foreign court. She scans it with tired eyes, not reading every word but sensing its tone, its intent. Then, with a motion practiced since youth, she draws the quill across the page, forming the name Elizabeth in careful script. It is legible. It is enough. The seal will be pressed later. The matter will pass into history as just another line in a record no one will read again. Around her, life continues in small motions. A maid brushes crumbs from the table with a cloth. A footman replenishes the fire, adding logs one at a time, listening to the soft crackle as flames return. Outside, somewhere distant, a dog barks. The sound travels through corridors, muffled by tapestries and time. No one hurries. No voices rise. Even the wind, when it finds its way through a gap in the window frame, does so with a sigh rather than a gust. This is the palace in winter, not abandoned, but subdued, like a house holding its breath. And she, in her chair, watches the fire. Not with fascination, not with thought, but with a kind of patient observation, as if she has seen this same flame burn in this same grate for centuries. Her fingers rest on the arms of the chair, rings glinting faintly, sapphires, rubies, a gold band from her mother's time. She does not twist them. She does not count them. They are simply there, like the furniture, like the walls, like the title she has carried so long it has become part of her bones. Power, at this stage, is not in command but in continuity. It is not in changing the world but in being the one constant within it. And so she remains, not because she wishes to, not because she fights to, but because she has not yet stopped. Sometimes, a servant pauses in the doorway, holding a tray with a cup of broth or a slice of toast. They wait. She turns her head slowly, nods once, and the offering is set upon a small table within reach. She may eat later. Or not. It does not matter. The gesture is what counts, the offering, the care, the unspoken understanding that nourishment is not only food but attention, presence, the quiet knowledge that someone remembers you are here. In the afternoon, if the light permits, she might be wheeled to a different chamber, one with a view of the garden, though little grows there now. Frost covers the paths. Statues wear caps of snow. A single rosebush, pruned short, stands bare against the wall. She looks at it without sentiment. Not with sorrow, not with hope, but with recognition. It, too, survives the winter. It, too, waits. Later, a lady in waiting sits nearby, reading aloud from a devotional book in a voice so soft it blends with the crackling fire. The words are familiar, psalms, prayers, reflections on grace and patience. She does not listen closely. She hears the rhythm, the rise and fall of the voice, the occasional pause to turn a page. It is not the meaning that comforts but the sound, steady, uninterrupted, like waves on a distant shore. Her eyes close. Not to sleep, not yet, but to rest behind the lids, where images come and go without demand. A ship on the sea. A meadow in spring. The face of someone long gone, smiling, then fading. No one disturbs her. No one asks if she dreams. They know better. Some silences are sacred not because they are holy, but because they are rare, moments when the weight of a crown, of a nation, of a lifetime, settles so deeply it becomes indistinguishable from peace. And you, listening now, wherever you are, might feel something similar, not the weight of rule, but the weight of your own day, finally setting down. Perhaps your shoulders soften. Perhaps your breath slows. Perhaps, like her, you do not need to speak, to move, to prove you are here. You simply are. And that is enough. The candles are lit one by one as dusk comes. Servants move through the rooms with taper sticks, touching flame to wick, retreating into shadow. The fire grows brighter. The room contracts around the light, drawing inward, like a hand closing gently around a warm stone. She remains in her chair, facing the flames, her profile outlined in gold. No portraits will capture this moment. No historian will write of it. But it exists, quiet, unremarkable, perfect in its simplicity. Another day passes. Not with triumph. Not with tragedy. But with dignity. With slowness. With breath. And so it goes. Part 2, The Air of the Palace. The air inside Whitehall Palace in the winter of 1603 is not something one merely breathes, it is something one feels, like a presence just behind the shoulder, slow and thick with time. It moves differently than outside air, heavier, older, shaped by centuries of footsteps, whispered conversations, fires long burned to ash. It carries scents that have no name, not quite dust, not quite smoke, not quite damp stone, but a blend of all three, softened by the faint sweetness of dried lavender tucked into folds of fabric and the occasional trace of beeswax from candles trimmed too late in the evening. This air does not rush. It settles. It lingers in corners, pools near the floor, rises only when disturbed by a passing figure or the soft opening of a door. And in the Queen's chamber, it seems almost still, as if holding its breath whenever she closes her eyes. You might imagine, if you're listening now, how such air would feel against your skin, cool at first, especially near the windows where frost forms delicate patterns on the inner glass, but growing warmer near the hearth, where the fire murmurs through the night. There is no sudden draft, no sharp wind, only the slow seep of cold through ancient mortar, inching across the floor like a memory returning. The stones themselves seem to exhale moisture in the mornings, beads of condensation forming along the baseboards, glistening in the pale light before vanishing by midday. The walls, lined with tapestries so old their colors have faded into whispers, absorb sound as much as they do dampness. Voices do not carry far here. A cough becomes muffled. A footstep fades after 2 steps. Even the ticking of a clock, if there is one nearby, is softened, as though time itself has grown tired and speaks in hushed tones. This is not a palace of grand halls and echoing chambers tonight. It is a place of thresholds, of doorways crossed slowly, of curtains drawn just enough to let someone pass, of rooms that exist more in feeling than in sight. The corridors are narrow, lit only by wall sconces with low flames, their glow barely reaching the next turn. Shadows stretch and fold into one another. Sometimes, a servant pauses, not out of hesitation, but because the darkness ahead feels like a different hour, a different season. They wait. Let their eyes adjust. Then move forward, one hand brushing the wall for guidance, the other holding a candle whose flame flickers but does not die. And in this quiet, the building itself seems to remember. Not in words, not in thoughts, but in creaks, in groans, and the way a timber shifts ever so slightly under the weight of snow on the roof. These are not sounds of danger. They are the breath of an old house, exhaling through joints and beams, settling deeper into the earth with each passing year. No one fears them. The attendants have learned to distinguish the voice of the palace, the soft pop of cooling iron in the fireplace, the distant drip of melted ice from a gutter, the rustle of a mouse beneath the floorboards. All of it belongs. All of it is part of the rhythm. Even the light here moves slowly. Sunlight, when it comes, enters through wavy glass, distorting the world beyond, bending trees, stretching figures, turning raindrops into streaks of silver. It does not illuminate evenly. It pools and patches, shifting over hours, climbing up walls like ivy, then retreating as clouds gather. By late afternoon, the rooms grow dim, shadows stretching across rugs like fingers. Lamps are lit. Candles are placed in silver holders, their flames casting trembling circles on the ceiling. The fire is stoked, not to blaze, but to glow, a steady, orange pulse at the heart of the room. And in that light, faces soften. Features blur. The lines of age and worry fade into warmth. For a little while, everyone looks younger. Or perhaps it is only that sorrow is harder to see in the dark. The queen sits within this air, within this light, breathing it in and out, unaware perhaps of how deeply it surrounds her. She does not comment on the chill, though her hands are often wrapped in wool. She does not complain when the fire sputters, though she turns her face toward it when the warmth returns. She simply exists within the atmosphere, as a leaf exists within the breeze, not fighting it, not shaping it, only moving with it. And those around her do the same. The physician who visits once a week does not speak of germs or microbes, concepts not yet imagined, but of humors, of balance, of the quality of the air she breathes. He checks the direction of the wind. Notes whether it comes from the east, dry and sharp, or from the west, wet and heavy. He believes, as many do, that illness can drift in on the breeze, carried in invisible mists from marshlands or from the breath of the sick. So he advises keeping windows closed, burning herbs, placing bowls of vinegar near doorways to purify what cannot be seen. And so, small rituals unfold without spectacle. A maid places rosemary and thyme in a linen pouch, tucks it beneath the edge of the bed. Another sprinkles dried mint on the rushes scattered across the floor, knowing its scent may lift the spirit, even if only slightly. At night, a brazier holds glowing coals, and upon them, a few drops of lavender oil are added, just enough to scent the air, not enough to overwhelm. The fragrance is subtle, like a memory of summer, and it lingers long after the fire has died. The garden, visible through the window when the curtains part, is frozen now. Paths are dusted with frost. Benches wear cloaks of snow. The fountain has stopped, its basin filled with ice, cracked in places like old porcelain. Yet life remains, a sparrow pecking at frozen seeds, a cat stalking silently along a stone wall, a single crow perched on the arm of a statue, unmoving, watching. Inside, potted herbs sit on shelves near the fire, sage, hyssop, lemon balm, kept alive not for beauty, but for use. When the queen coughs, a soft, dry sound, more habit than illness, a sprig is steeped in hot water, sweetened with honey, brought to her on a small tray. She sips it slowly. Says nothing. Returns the cup. The ritual repeats, not because it heals, but because it is known. Because it has been done before. Because in uncertain times, certainty lies in repetition. Days pass without clear markers. Not every morning brings a sunrise worth noting. Not every evening ends with a dramatic sky. Most moments are ordinary, a spoon stirring broth, a hand smoothing a blanket, a log shifting in the fire. And yet, within these small acts, there is a kind of peace. No one rushes. No one raises their voice. Decisions are delayed, sometimes forgotten. A letter arrives from the north, important, perhaps, but it waits on a table for days, unopened, until someone remembers to bring it forward. Even then, it is read slowly, aloud, in a calm tone, as if time has agreed to stretch just a little longer. The physician returns. He wears a long coat of dark wool, his boots damp from the courtyard. He warms his hands by the fire before approaching. He does not startle her. He waits until she turns her head, acknowledges him with a slight nod. Then he takes her wrist, gently, and feels the pulse beneath thin skin. It is slow. Steady. Not strong, but present. He writes a note in Latin, spiritus deficit, the breath grows weak. But he does not say this aloud. Instead, he suggests a tonic of elderflower and honey, taken twice daily. He recommends more rest. Less sitting near open doors. He does not speak of death. He does not need to. They both know it is near. But near is not now. And now is what matters. Outside, the city continues, markets open, carriages roll through muddy streets, children shout in alleyways, but none of it reaches this room. Here, the world is reduced to essentials, warmth, light, breath, silence. The sounds of London are distant, like waves heard from deep within a cave. What matters is the flicker of flame, the soft rustle of fabric, the occasional sigh from someone resting in a chair. And you, listening now, wherever you are, might feel this quiet beginning to settle within you. Perhaps your chest rises and falls a little slower. Perhaps your fingers have gone slack. Perhaps the room around you has grown softer at the edges, as if dissolving into shadow. That's all right. You don't need to hold on. You don't need to follow every word. Some stories are not meant to be remembered, only felt, like the warmth of a blanket, like the hush before sleep. In the evenings, when the last servant has left and the door is closed just enough to block the draft, the room becomes a sanctuary. The fire glows. The candles burn low. The queen sits, eyes half closed, listening to the silence not as emptiness, but as company. No music plays. No prayers are spoken. Just the sound of breathing, hers, and perhaps the cat curled at her feet, dreaming of birds or sunlight. Time does not press here. It drifts. It lingers. It allows. And so the days pass, not with announcement, not with ceremony, but with slowness. With stillness. With air that wraps around everything like a worn shawl, familiar, comforting, carrying the scent of years. Part 3. The Hands That Held Her. The women who move through the Queen's chamber are not named in history books. Their faces do not appear in portraits. They leave no signatures on treaties or letters of state. And yet, they are there, always, their presence as constant as the turning of the seasons, as quiet as dust settling on velvet. They come in the morning, before the fire is fully lit, their footsteps soft on the stone floor, their hands already busy with tasks known by heart. One carries a brush made of boar bristles, its handle worn smooth from years of use. Another folds a night rail with careful precision, smoothing each crease as if ironing time itself. They do not speak unless spoken to. They do not linger where they are not needed. But they see everything, the way her fingers tremble slightly when lifting a cup, the way her breath catches when shifting in her chair, the way she stares at the window long after the light has gone. There are 5 of them, though not all come every day. They take turns, like shifts of the moon. Each has her own rhythm, her own small rituals. One hums while mending, not songs with words, but wordless melodies passed down from her mother, tunes that rise and fall like wind through bare branches. Another keeps a small notebook hidden beneath her mattress, where she writes not of politics or court gossip, but of ordinary things, the taste of fresh butter that morning, the color of the sky at dusk, the way the cat sneezed after stepping in spilled herbs. She does not read it again. She simply writes, as one might whisper a prayer into the dark, not for an answer, but for the comfort of having spoken. They dress the Queen together, moving around her like water flowing around a stone, one adjusting the farthingale, another fastening the sleeves, a third placing the ruff just so. Their fingers are gentle. They know where the skin is thin, where the bones press too close to the surface. They do not rush. There is no need. The day does not demand speed. If a lace breaks, they replace it without comment. If a stain appears on the gown, they note it quietly and set it aside for later cleaning. Nothing is ever said aloud about decline. It is simply met with care, like sheltering a flame from the wind. One of them, Margaret, has served since the Queen was still strong enough to dance in the great hall. She remembers the rustle of silk as Elizabeth twirled beneath chandeliers, the sound of laughter rising to the rafters. Now, she watches her sit for hours without moving, her hands resting in her lap like birds that have forgotten how to fly. Margaret does not speak of those days. She knows memory can be a burden as much as a gift. Instead, she brings her a shawl knitted by her sister, soft as thistledown, the color of twilight. She drapes it over her shoulders without a word. The Queen nods. That is enough. Another, and is younger, not yet 30, and sometimes, in the quiet moments, she wonders what it will be like to grow old. Not in fear, not in dread, but with curiosity, like wondering what lies beyond a distant hill. She has never been in love. She may never marry. This life, of service, of routine, of tending to someone greater than herself, is all she has known since she was 16. And yet, there is dignity in it. In the way the Queen occasionally rests a hand on hers when passing a cup. In the way she says, very softly, "Thank you," as if truly meaning it. Those small acknowledgments carry more weight than gold. They eat in silence most evenings, the attendants gathered in a smaller room near the kitchen, their meals simple, broth, bread, a piece of cheese wrapped in cloth. They speak in low voices, not of grand matters, but of home. One misses the smell of rain on hayfields. Another recalls walking barefoot along a riverbank in summer, the cool mud between her toes. They do not complain. They do not boast. They simply remember, as people do when the world outside feels vast and indifferent, and all they have is each other's presence. At night, one remains nearby, not to watch, not to guard, but to listen. She sits in a chair near the door, a book in her lap, though she rarely reads. Her eyes grow heavy. The fire dims. Sometimes she dozes, waking only at the faintest sound, a cough, a shift in the bed, the soft call of a name that no longer belongs to anyone living. She rises then, quietly, checks the blanket, adds a log to the fire if needed, then returns to her seat. No thanks are given. None are expected. This is simply what is done. The physician comes and goes, but it is the women who notice the changes first. They see how the queen eats less, not refusing food, but taking only a few sips of broth, a bite of toast soaked in milk. They see how she sleeps longer, how her dreams seem to pull her under like a slow tide. They see how she no longer corrects them when they misplace a comb or spill a drop of water. Once, such things would have drawn a sharp glance. Now, there is only stillness. Acceptance. They do not speak of death. They do not whisper about succession or what will happen when the crown passes. Those are men's concerns, court concerns, distant thunder. Here, in this room, the only truth is the present, the warmth of the fire, the weight of the blanket, the rhythm of breath. And so they continue, folding, brushing, listening, waiting, not as servants, but as witnesses. The queen does not speak much now, but when she does, her voice is soft, like paper turning in an old book. She addresses them by name, though sometimes the name is from years ago, a title, a nickname no one has used in decades. They do not correct her. They answer as if nothing is amiss, their voices calm, unhurried. One day, she calls Margaret Luce, a name no one recognizes. Margaret pauses only slightly, then replies, "Yes, Your Majesty," and continues brushing her hair, slowly, gently, stroke after stroke, as if smoothing time itself. Perhaps Luce was someone she once knew. Perhaps it is a memory mistaken, a thread pulled loose from the tapestry of her mind. It does not matter. The moment passes like breath on glass. They have learned to move without noise, to anticipate needs before they are spoken. If her hand trembles, a cup is already steadied. If her eyes close too long, a blanket is drawn over her knees without disturbance. They know the rhythm of her breathing, how it slows in the late afternoon, how it deepens near midnight. They light candles not all at once, but one by one, allowing the room to adjust to the glow, so the transition from day to night feels seamless, dreamlike. No sudden changes. No sharp edges. Everything here is softened, blurred, like the world seen through old glass. There is a ritual each evening. Just before the last servant leaves, one of them reads aloud from a devotional text, Psalms, usually, or passages from St. Augustine. The voice is low, rhythmic, almost singing in its cadence. The queen does not always listen. Her eyes may be closed, her face turned toward the fire. But the sound remains, a steady current beneath the silence, like water flowing under ice. The reader does not rush. She lingers on phrases, lets vowels stretch like shadows. Yeah, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, the words hang in the air, not heavy with fear, but gentle, like a hand placed on the shoulder. No one speaks of what lies ahead. The passage is not chosen for meaning, but for sound, for the way it moves through the room, calming, grounding, familiar. Afterward, the book is closed, the candle extinguished, and the woman retreats, pausing only to glance back. The queen sits as she was, unchanged, wrapped in stillness. And outside, the city sleeps, unaware of this quiet vigil, this slow surrender to time. One of the younger attendants, Sarah, sometimes stays beyond her shift, not because she must, but because she feels a kind of peace here she cannot find elsewhere. In her own room, thoughts race, worries about family, doubts about her future, the weight of decisions yet to come. But here, in this chamber, there is no need to decide. There is only presence. She sits in the corner, mending a torn sleeve, her needle moving up and down like a pendulum. The fire crackles. The cat stretches and settles again. And for a little while, everything is complete, not because it is perfect, but because it simply is. They do not speak of legacy. They do not wonder how history will remember her. That is for scholars and scribes, for men who write books by lamplight. Here, they know her not as Gloriana, not as the Virgin Queen, but as a woman who likes warm milk before sleep, who flinches slightly at loud noises, who once smiled at a joke no one else heard. These are the truths that matter, small, fragile, human. And you, listening now, wherever you are, might feel something similar, not the grand story, but the quiet moments that make up a life. The hand that holds yours. The voice that says your name softly. The blanket pulled up just a little higher. You don't need to remember this story. You don't need to stay awake for it. You can let it drift past you like wind through trees, like ash falling through still air. Let your breath slow. Let your body sink. There is no need to hold on. Part 4, The Mind That Remembered. The thoughts that drift through her mind now are not like rivers with direction, but like leaves on a still pond, floating, turning, carried by no current. They come uninvited, stay for a moment, then slip away without leaving ripples. She does not chase them. She does not call them back. She lets them pass like clouds seeing through wavy glass, their shapes shifting, dissolving, becoming something else before they vanish. A scent rises from the fire, beeswax and old wood, and suddenly, she is elsewhere. Not in time, not in place, but in feeling. The warmth on her face is not from the hearth, but from summer sun at Richmond Palace, long ago. She sees the garden in bloom, roses heavy with dew, the fountain sparkling under blue sky. A lute plays softly beneath an arbor. Someone laughs, a sound she cannot name, but knows. Then the image fades, like breath on cold glass, and she is back in the chair, eyes half closed, the fire still burning low. These memories do not arrive in order. There is no past, present, or future here. Only moments, suspended. Sometimes, she speaks, not to anyone in the room, but into the air, as if answering someone just beyond sight. I told you, she murmurs, voice faint, it would rain by evening. No one replies. No one asks who she speaks to. The attendants have learned not to interrupt. They know these words are not for the living. They belong to someone who walked beside her decades ago, whose face she can no longer recall, but whose presence lingers like perfume in an empty room. Perhaps it was Lester. Perhaps a lady in waiting long gone. Perhaps no one real at all. It does not matter. The sentence has been spoken. The silence accepts it. She no longer corrects others when they misremember. When a servant refers to an event that happened at 88 as if it were 79, she does not respond. She simply listens, as one might hear distant bells across a valley, aware of the sound, but not compelled to trace its source. Facts have grown soft at the edges, like ink left too long in damp air. Dates blur. Names dissolve. And yet, she does not seem troubled. If anything, there is relief in it, as if, after a lifetime of holding the world together with precision, she is finally allowed to let go. To forget is not failure. It is release. At times, she opens her Bible, not to read, but to touch. The pages are worn thin from years of turning, the corners softened, the margins stained with candle wax and fingerprints. It rests open on Psalms, though she does not look at the words. Her finger moves slowly along the line, tracing the letters as if reading Braille meant only for her skin. The text is familiar, so familiar that meaning has faded into rhythm. She knows the cadence of the Lord is my shepherd not as doctrine, but as breath. It lives in her bones, deeper than thought. Sometimes, she whispers a phrase, barely audible, her lips forming the sounds without effort. No one listens closely. They know this is not preaching. It is prayer as habit, as comfort, as the quietest kind of companionship. She dreams while awake. Or perhaps she remembers while asleep. The boundary has blurred. One afternoon, she stares at the window for nearly an hour, watching snow fall in slow spirals. Then, very softly, she says, "The ship is coming in." The attendants do not react. There is no ship. The Thames is frozen. But in her mind, perhaps she sees it, a galleon cutting through gray waves, sails full, flags rippling in the wind. She watches it dock. Sees men disembark. Hears voices calling in French, in Spanish, in tongues she once knew well. She does not smile. She does not frown. She simply observes, as if viewing a play from a great distance, where faces are indistinct and words are lost to the sea. There was a time when every arrival mattered, when ambassadors brought letters sealed with wax, when councils debated for hours over treaties and alliances, when her decisions shaped nations. Now, those days feel like stories told about someone else. She does not miss them. She does not regret them. They simply exist, like old books on a high shelf, their spines cracked, their pages fragile. She once feared dying without securing the succession. She once stayed awake at night, weighing the claims of distant cousins, fearing civil war. Now, she knows it will be decided. By whom, she does not wonder. It will happen as it must. The thread will pass to another hand. The world will continue, not because of her, but in spite of time. She no longer keeps track of the days. No calendar is marked. No feast or fast stands out from the rest. Morning comes, evening falls, and the rhythm of the palace continues without announcement. The attendants know when Sunday arrives only because the chaplain appears at the door with his book. She does not rise for prayer. She nods slightly as he begins, her eyes closed, her hands folded in her lap. The words, "Almighty God, unto whom all hearts are open," drift through the room like incense. She does not follow them closely. She feels their shape, their tone, the way they settle into the silence between breaths. It is enough. Sometimes, she reaches for a ring on her finger, one set with a deep blue sapphire, its stone worn smooth by decades of touch. She turns it slowly, not as if seeking meaning, but as a hand might trace the edge of a cup, finding comfort in repetition. This ring once belonged to her mother's lady-in-waiting. Or was it a gift from Essex? The memory slips before it forms. It does not matter. The ring remains. Its weight. Its coolness. The way it catches the firelight in fleeting sparks. Objects, more than people, have become her anchors, the velvet arm of the chair, the texture of the blanket, the sound of a clock ticking in another room. They do not ask anything of her. They simply exist, steady, unchanged. She has stopped writing letters. Once, her hand shaped words for hours, proclamations, replies, notes sealed with care. Now, the quill lies unused. Ink dries in the well. When a document requires her signature, she signs it without reading, her hand guided more by muscle memory than intent. The pen moves slowly, shakily, but the name, Elizabeth, still emerges, recognizable, though the flourish at the end has softened, faded, like a wave retreating from shore. No one comments. No one suggests she rest. They wait. They accept. They understand that some acts continue not because they must, but because stopping would feel like surrender, and surrender, even when gentle, is still an ending. At night, when the last candle is lit and the fire glows orange in the grate, she sometimes speaks French. Not clearly. Not in full sentences. Just fragments, Il fait froid, it is cold. Or Où est la lumière? Where is the light? The attendants do not respond. They do not pretend to understand. They let the words hang in the air, untranslated, unclaimed. Perhaps they are memories of childhood, when she spoke French at court, when language was a game, a weapon, a mask. Now, they are simply sounds, soft, familiar, belonging to no one moment, no single time. Thinking has grown heavy. Not painful, but slow, like lifting a book bound in lead. She begins a thought, about the garden, about the weather, about a face seen long ago, and halfway through, it dissolves. She does not chase it. She does not sigh. She simply stops. The silence takes over. And in that pause, there is peace. Not emptiness. Not loss. But release. Like setting down a burden carried too long, not with drama, but with quiet relief. And you, listening now, wherever you are, might feel something similar, not the sharp sting of forgetting, but the softness of letting go. Perhaps your thoughts, too, begin and fade without completion. Perhaps your mind drifts from one image to the next, unguided, unjudged. That's all right. You don't need to hold on. You don't need to remember. You can simply be here, in this moment, where nothing is required, nothing demanded. Let your breath grow deeper. Let your body sink into stillness. Let the story flow past you like water over stone, shaping without force, moving without haste. For her, the past is no longer a kingdom to rule, but a landscape to wander, vast, quiet, half-remembered. And she walks through it now, not as a queen, but as a shadow, light as dust, returning to the earth. Part 5. The Body That Wore Time. The body, in its final seasons, does not announce its surrender with drama. It does not cry out. It does not resist in great gestures. Instead, it slows, gently, steadily, like a clock whose weights descend inch by inch, without protest. And so it is with her. The woman who once stood for hours in ceremony, who danced until midnight at court revels, who rode through rain and wind across her kingdom, now sits for most of the day, her hands resting in her lap, her breath coming in soft, measured waves. Movement is no longer an act of will but of necessity, and even then, only when needed. To shift in the chair. To lift a cup. To turn her face toward the fire. Each motion is deliberate, unhurried, as if time has agreed to stretch just enough to allow her passage through each moment without strain. She no longer walks to chapel. Once, she would rise at dawn, dressed in deep velvet, her crown placed lightly upon her wig, and proceed down long corridors lined with silent attendants. Now, she prays where she sits, eyes closed, lips moving in silence or speaking words too faint to carry beyond her breath. The chaplain comes to her, not the other way around. He reads psalms in a voice that blends with the crackling fire, his words rising and falling like tides. She does not always follow. Sometimes, her mind drifts, not into sleep, but into a kind of waking stillness, where images come and go like reflections on water. A meadow. A ship. A child's hand in hers. Then nothing. Then back again. No one interrupts. No one calls her name. They know this is not absence. It is presence of another kind. Her appetite has faded, not suddenly, but over months, like light leaving a room at dusk. Food is brought, warm broth, toast soaked in milk, a single strawberry brought early from a hothouse, but she eats little. Not because she refuses, not because she suffers, but because hunger no longer visits her as it once did. The servants do not insist. They place the tray within reach, wait a while, then remove it untouched, without comment. They understand that the body, in its wisdom, knows when nourishment is no longer useful. What matters now is comfort, not sustenance. So they offer what is gentle, warm drinks, soft bread, honey stirred into tea. She sips slowly, sometimes setting the cup down before finishing. That is enough. Her hands, once strong enough to sign treaties and hold scepters, now rest open, fingers slightly curled, as if shaped by years of holding things now gone. The skin is thin, nearly translucent in the candlelight, blue veins tracing delicate paths beneath the surface. Rings still adorn her fingers, sapphires, rubies, a gold band etched with Latin script, but they no longer fit tightly. They slip slightly when she moves, as if her body is already beginning to release itself from form. No one adjusts them. No one mentions it. The rings remain, not as symbols of power, but as companions, familiar weights against her skin. She sleeps more now, though not deeply. Her rest is not the sleep of exhaustion, but of withdrawal, a gradual retreat from the world of sound and light. She dozes in the chair by the fire, head tilted slightly, breath soft and shallow. The attendants do not wake her. They let her be, moving around her with quiet steps, lowering their voices further, as if afraid to disturb a dream too fragile to survive interruption. When she stirs, she does not startle. She returns slowly, like someone emerging from underwater, blinking once, then twice, then settling back into awareness without urgency. No one asks if she dreamed. No one expects an answer. The space between waking and sleeping has grown thin, and she moves between them as easily as turning a page. At night, she remains in the chair longer than before. She refuses the bed, not with words, but with silence. When they prepare the sheets, smooth the blankets, warm the linens with bricks pulled from the coals, she shakes her head almost imperceptibly. So they leave the bed unused, and instead place extra cushions behind her, a woolen blanket across her legs, a small pillow beneath her head. The fire is kept alive all night, tended by a servant who sits nearby, adding logs one at a time, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing. Candles burn in silver holders, their flames flickering but steady, casting trembling circles on the ceiling. The room contracts around the light, drawing inward, like a hand closing gently around warmth. Pain exists, but not as agony. It is present in the stiffness of her knees, the ache in her lower back when shifting position, the dryness in her throat that no amount of tea can soothe. But she does not speak of it. She does not grimace. She accepts it as part of the air, like cold or silence. When discomfort grows, she closes her eyes, breathes slowly, and waits. It passes, not because it vanishes, but because attention moves elsewhere, to the sound of the wind outside, to the cat stretching at her feet, to the memory of sunlight on water. The physician applies a poultice of honey and thyme to her chest, believing it may ease her breathing. It does little, perhaps, but the warmth is kind. She does not thank him. She does not complain. She simply allows it, as one allows rain to fall. Her skin has grown paler, almost gray in certain lights, as if the blood beneath has slowed its journey. Her lips, once rouged to mimic youth, now appear thin and colorless, parted slightly with each breath. Her hair, what remains beneath the lace cap, is fine, white, barely visible. She no longer wears the heavy wigs of state. They are too hot, too heavy. Instead, she covers her head with simple linen, tied softly beneath the chin. No one remarks on the change. No portrait will capture this version of her. But those who care for her see it, the way her jawline has softened, the hollows beneath her cheekbones, the translucence of her ears in the candlelight. She is becoming less solid, less defined, as if dissolving into the air around her. Breathing, once effortless, now requires small efforts. Not labored, not gasping, but deeper, slower, as if each breath must travel farther to reach its end. In the quiet hours of the night, when the fire burns low and the attendants have withdrawn, the sound of her breath becomes the only movement in the room, a soft inhale, a longer exhale, a pause, then again. It is not weak. It is not failing. It is simply softer. Like a tide receding not in defeat, but in natural return. The cat, curled at her feet, lifts its head at the rhythm, then settles again, unafraid. Even animals sense that this is not suffering. This is transition. She no longer speaks in full sentences. Words come sparingly, a name, a fragment, a sound that might be agreement or merely breath given shape. "Margaret," she says one evening, very quietly. The woman turns, expecting a request. But none comes. The queen closes her eyes. The moment passes. Perhaps she only wished to say the name. Perhaps it was a memory mistaken for presence. It does not matter. The word was spoken. The silence holds it. At times, she reaches for the Bible, still open on the table beside her. Her fingers trace the same line as before, "Yeah, though I walk through the valley," but she does not read. She feels the texture of the paper, the indentation of the letters, the warmth of the page near the fire. It is enough. Faith, at this stage, is not belief in what comes after, but trust in what is now, the warmth, the light, the quiet company of those who stay. And you, listening now, wherever you are, might feel your own body beginning to soften. Perhaps your shoulders have dropped. Perhaps your jaw has unclenched. Perhaps your breath has deepened without your noticing. That's all right. You don't need to hold on. You don't need to follow every word. Let them drift past you like leaves on a slow river. Let your mind wander. Let your thoughts fade. There is no need to remember. There is only this moment, warm, still, safe. No one rushes. No one whispers of endings. The attendants move as they always have, folding linens, stirring broth, brushing ash from the hearth. They do not gather. They do not weep. They simply continue, because continuing is the kindest thing. Grief will come later. For now, there is only care, in the placement of a cushion, in the tilt of a cup, in the decision to leave the bed unmade, the chair warmed, the fire burning through the night. Time does not measure itself here in hours. It measures in breaths, in candle flames, in the slow dimming of light. And she, in her chair, surrounded by silence and devotion, moves with it, not forward, not backward, but inward. Into stillness. Into peace. Into the long, soft hush that comes before sleep. Part 6. The room where she stayed. The room does not change, even as everything within it shifts. The walls remain the same, stone beneath tapestries faded to soft grays and blues, their threads worn thin by decades of dust and candle smoke. The windows hold their shape, though the glass is old and wavy, turning the world outside into something dreamlike, trees bent under snow, paths erased by frost, the sky a blanket of low cloud. The fire burns in the same grate, fed by logs placed one at a time, flames rising and falling like breath. Candles stand in silver holders, their wax pulling in slow circles, some burned nearly to the base, others just lit, their light joining the quiet glow that fills the chamber each evening. Nothing here is hurried. Nothing is new. And in the center of it all, she sits, still in the chair by the window, wrapped in blankets, her hands resting in her lap, her eyes often closed, her face turned slightly toward the warmth. She no longer rises. She no longer speaks. The days pass without announcement, and she moves through them not with resistance, but with surrender, gentle, continuous, like a leaf falling from a tree not because the wind pulls it, but because it has simply let go. The attendants come and go as they always have, their steps soft, their voices lower than before, as if speaking too clearly might break the hush. They do not gather around her. They do not stare. They perform their duties, smoothing the blanket, adjusting the pillow, placing a cup of warm tea within reach, and then return to their places, sitting quietly, reading, mending, waiting. No one says she is dying. No one needs to. It is understood, not as tragedy, but as completion, like the last note of a song held just long enough to be felt, then released. Candles burn now both day and night. There is no distinction. Light is kept constant, not for vision, but for comfort, a steady presence in the growing dimness. One servant tends them, moving silently from holder to holder, trimming wicks, replacing those that have gutted out. The scent of beeswax fills the air, mingling with the faint sweetness of dried lavender tucked into the folds of fabric near the bed. The fire is never allowed to die. Even in the early hours, when the palace is deepest in sleep, someone remains, a handmaiden in a chair near the hearth, drowsy but awake, adding a log when the flames shrink, listening to the rhythm of breath from across the room. It is not duty alone that keeps her there. It is devotion, quiet, unspoken, deeper than obligation. She does not eat now. Not even broth. The tray is brought, set down, left untouched. No one insists. No one removes it with disappointment. It simply stays, cooling slowly, until someone lifts it away hours later, without comment. Thirst, too, has faded. She sips nothing. Her lips are dry, but she does not reach for water. Her body has ceased its requests. It no longer seeks to sustain. It only rests. And so they let it be. They wipe her forehead with a damp cloth. They moisten her lips gently with honeyed water. But they do not force. They do not interfere. This is not neglect. It is respect, for the body's wisdom, for the natural slowing, for the silence that grows louder with each passing hour. At times, her breath changes. Not suddenly. Not with struggle. But with subtle shifts, longer pauses between inhales, shallower movements of the chest, a soft rattle deep in the throat that comes and goes like distant thunder. The physician listens, nods once, says nothing. He checks her pulse, faint, slow, but still present, and writes a note in Latin, vita deficit, life is ebbing. But he does not speak it aloud. Words like that belong to records, not to rooms where silence is sacred. Instead, he places a hand lightly on her wrist, holds it for a moment, then withdraws. His visit is brief. He knows his work is done. Medicine cannot extend what is choosing to end. The cat remains at her feet, curled into a tight circle, its fur rising and falling with each breath. It does not leave, even when food is called. It seems to understand, in the way animals do, that this is not ordinary stillness. It lifts its head occasionally, ears twitching at a sound no one else hears, then settles again, purring softly, a vibration barely felt through the floor. Once, she reaches down with a trembling hand, strokes its back with 2 fingers. The touch is so light it might have been imagined. The cat does not open its eyes. It only leans slightly into the contact, as if acknowledging her presence one final time. Outside, London sleeps beneath a layer of snow. The streets are empty. Smoke curls from chimneys. A single bell tolls in the distance, St. Paul's, perhaps, marking an hour no one counts. Inside Whitehall, most rooms are dark. Only a few lights flicker behind closed doors. But here, in this chamber, the glow persists. The fire crackles. The candles burn. The air is warm, thick with the scent of wax and wool and old paper. Time does not press forward. It lingers. It allows. It gives space for the slow unfolding of an ending that asks for nothing but peace. She opens her eyes less frequently now. When she does, her gaze is not focused. She does not look at faces. She looks through them, toward the window, toward the fire, toward something beyond sight. Her lips move sometimes, forming words too quiet to catch. A name? A prayer? A fragment of a song from childhood? It does not matter. The sounds are not meant to be understood. They are simply breath given shape, voice returning to air. One of the attendants, Margaret, sits nearby, sewing a button onto a sleeve. She does not look up. She does not lean closer. But she slows her breathing, matches it to the Queen's, as if offering rhythm instead of words. Night deepens. The fire glows orange-red, casting long shadows on the ceiling. The cat stretches, yawns, then curls again. One candle sputters and dies, its wick drowning in wax. No one replaces it. There is enough light still. There is always enough. The attendants remain in their chairs, some half asleep, some watching, all present. They do not speak of what is happening. They do not whisper prayers aloud. They simply stay, because staying is the truest form of love. Not grand gestures. Not tears. Just presence. Just being there, in the quiet, as someone moves from one state to another, unseen, unhurried. And then, it happens, not with drama, not with gasp or cry, but with stillness. Her breath, already slow, pauses. Then comes again, softer. Then pauses longer. Then another, fainter still. Then nothing. A full minute passes. Then 2. No one moves. No one speaks. They wait. They watch. They feel the space between breaths grow wider, like fields stretching into dusk. And when it becomes clear that the next breath will not come, no one announces it. No one weeps. They simply know. The room does not change. The fire still burns. The candles still glow. The snow still falls outside. The cat stirs, stretches, then settles again. Life continues, not loudly, not abruptly, but gently, as if the world has agreed not to startle the silence. The attendants rise slowly, one by one, and begin the small rituals of care, straightening the blanket, closing her hands gently over her lap, extinguishing only the candles that have burned too low. The crown, removed earlier in the week and placed on a cushion nearby, remains untouched. No one rushes to claim it. No one speaks of succession. For now, there is only this moment, sacred, quiet, complete. Later, they will weep. Later, messengers will ride through snow-covered roads, carrying news to distant courts. Later, bells will ring across the city, announcing the end of an era. But not now. Now, there is only peace. The weight is gone. The burden is laid down. The woman who carried a nation on her shoulders for 45 years has finally rested. And you, listening now, wherever you are, might feel something similar, not sorrow, not loss, but release. Perhaps your breath has slowed. Perhaps your body has sunk deeper into stillness. Perhaps your thoughts have drifted away like smoke into night. That's all right. You don't need to stay awake. You don't need to remember. You can let go, just as she did, not with fear, but with trust. Trust in the warmth. Trust in the darkness. Trust in the quiet that holds you, as it held her, in the long, soft hush before sleep. The fire burns lower. The candles flicker. One by one, their flames disappear, not with a pop, but with a sigh. Shadows stretch across the floor. The room grows darker, but not cold. The embers glow red beneath ash. Somewhere, a clock ticks, then stops. No one winds it. All is still. The night holds you now. You are safe. There is no need to stay awake. No need to listen closely. The story has done its work, not to teach, not to excite, but to carry you gently into stillness. If your eyes are closed, let them stay that way. If your breath has slowed, let it slow a little more. There is nothing ahead to meet. No turn, no surprise, no demand. Only this quiet, this warmth, this soft descent into rest. You have been carried far, through candlelit rooms, through winter air thick with memory, through the hush of a life ending as quietly as a breath fading into sleep. And now, there is nothing more to follow. No words to catch. No thoughts to keep. You can let them go, like leaves on a river, drifting beyond sight. Perhaps you feel heavy. That's all right. It's the weight of release. Perhaps your mind wanders, touching old memories, familiar feelings, then letting them slip away. That's all right too. You don't need to hold on to anything. Not tonight. The fire in the room has burned low. The last candle has gone out. The snow still falls over London, covering paths, softening edges, blanketing the world in white. Inside, all is still. The attendants have left, one by one, stepping softly into the hall, closing the door just enough to keep the cold out. The cat sleeps at the foot of an empty chair. The crown rests on its cushion, waiting for hands that are not yet here. But none of that matters now. What matters is this moment, your breath, your body, the gentle dark around you. You are not alone. You are held by the night, by silence, by the unseen presence of centuries of quiet endings, of lives that slipped away like shadows at dawn. And so, dear listener, rest. Let sleep come as it will, not forced, not chased, but welcomed, like an old friend arriving at the door. You do not need to speak. You do not need to move. You only need to be here, and then, not even that. Good night. Sleep well. You are safe.